Hey guys, tonight we're keeping it gentle and a bit ridiculous. You're arriving at a moonlit caravanserai, where the night manager's favorite task is raiding Camel Snores with embroidered pillows. If you were actually about to trek the Silk Road in person, you probably wouldn't survive the first hour, sun dust, and a remarkably opinionated saddle would vote you off the desert island. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know your location and local time in the comments, because it's oddly calming to picture a quiet constellation of listeners scattered across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive beneath a heavy arch banded with iron studs that look like constellations hammered into wood. The gate is closed now, resting like a sentence that knows when to stop. Inside, the courtyard breathes a cool hush. Stone holds the day's warmth the way a mug holds the last sip of tea reluctantly. A trough glints along one edge, snagging the moon as if it were also passing through. You can smell straw, lamp oil, and a trace of mint someone crushed underfoot. Camels shift in the shadows, each one the shape of a drowsy hill, each one making low, thoughtful sounds like a kettle deciding whether to boil. The innkeeper narrow-shouldered, lamp balanced on a hip pads over to you with a stack of pillows stitched in patient spirals. The threads catch light like tiny rivers. We listen, your guide murmurs, as if the courtyard itself could take offense at a loud voice. You kneel beside the first stall, a Bactrian camel, double-humped and smug, in that dignified way only an animal wearing fur knickers can manage. Exhales a long, rippling snore you feel more than hear. The innkeeper flips a pillow to show an embroidered pomegranate bursting with little seeds. Deep sleeper, they whisper, good for the north corner. Apparently, in this place, pillows hold opinions. This caravanserai feels both practical and strangely. Tender stone rooms set around a central square, stables at ground level, sleeping quarters above, a small domed chamber in the middle, where a raised platform serves as a traveler's prayer space. Many caravanserais really do follow this pattern. Fortified walls, a single monumental entrance, water fodder, and shelter for traders and their animals spaced along the road like beads on a careful string. Your shoes scuff the flagstones as you move along, and the evening reminds you that the Silk Road isn't one road at all, but a web of paths braided by countless feet and hooves. Historians still wonder if calling it the Silk Road charms us into imagining a single highway when it was always beautifully and messily a network. Another camel rumbles a gentle grrrrrr, the sound of a cupboard door that almost shuts itself. The innkeeper produces a second pillow, this one with concentric cloud swirls stitched in soft blues. You hold it like a judge holding up a scorecard, except your card is a nap magnet. Midnight weather, the innkeeper says, and taps your hand once, approving your unearned expertise. Your job, it seems, is not to master the desert, but to be a kind audience to the mammals who do. You wander past shadowed arches where saddles hang in a quiet row, their leather gone matte with dust. Above small windows, blink like sleepy eyes. In one corner, a brazier clicks as it cools, and someone's forgotten cup of tea has made a ring the exact size of Mars when you draw it with your thumb. Out beyond the gate, an actual desert waits. Dunes, dry scrub, and a sky full of stars that look suspiciously like spilled salt. Out here, stars are the push notifications of the night reliable, quiet, never in a hurry. The innkeeper's pillow stack includes a design you haven't seen before. Small daisies climbing a lattice. Breeze sleeper, they explain. Barely a snore, almost polite. You smile, imagining a camel apologizing before it breathes. Someone, likely the innkeeper's aunt or cousin, did this suzani embroidery with hours and tea breaks stitched right into the seams. That part, too, is a small truth of the region. In Central Asia, Suzani textiles once traveled as dowry treasures and wall hangings, mapped with pomegranates for abundance and vines for life. Here they are, babysitting camels. A job is a job. Asterisk between pillows. The innkeeper gestures at the center platform. Patrons used to build small mosques there, they say, so God could find you while you traveled. It's an image that gives the courtyard a different gravity, making it less of a parking lot and more of a human harbor. Historians still wonder whether those central pavilions were mainly for prayer, for status, or simply for shade that happened to be holy. In practice, on nights like this, it is where a cat is currently conducting important research into whether humans will pet it twice. Asterisk. You notice the rhythm of the place, the clink of a halter ring against a post, the clop-soft of hooves adjusting straw, the low voice of a guard on the wall answering someone you can't see. Your breath picks up the tempo, slows, matches the courtyard's pace. The innkeeper stops to adjust a wooden wedge at the big gate. These studs, they say, patting one of the iron rosettes, help keep a battering ram honest. Not that anyone is battering anything tonight. The only assault is the moon's soft insistence on silvering every corner. You wonder how many nights this gate has closed and opened in its life. Thousands. Tens of thousands. The thought is strangely calming. Like holding a smooth pebble someone else has also found useful. Asterisk. Another camel offers a new sound. A long sleepy hum with a hiccup at the end, like a singer who remembered the lyrics to beats late. The innkeeper nods, satisfied, and hands you the pillow with tiny fish stitched along its borders. River dream, they whisper. You resist the urge to applaud. This raiding ritual, whimsical as it is, has logic. Noisier sleepers get tucked near the outer stalls, lighter ones closer to the rooms. It's considerate zoning law, by pillow, where Caravanserais truly that thoughtful about acoustics. Maybe not in any written rule book, but many were laid out with a kind of animal-human compromise baked into the plan. Animals ground level for warmth and security. People above for air and quiet. Asterisk. As you lean against a column, you feel the stone's temperature cooler where the night has licked it, warmer where the day refused to let go. A breeze moves through the archways like someone rearranging drapes. Somewhere, a stringed instrument gives a testing pluck. You imagine a merchant from Far East or West keeping a private concert barely louder than breathing. It occurs to you that, while silk gets the headline, most long-distance cargo was more humble. Wool, grain, porcelain, paper, spices. Even stories folded into songs exactly like the one you're not quite hearing. Wide truth. Caravanserais anchored those flows, offering fodder, water, and security. Lesser-known detail. Some even kept simple ledgers tracking not just travelers but their animals' fodder allotments. A kind of four-legged accounting that made sure oats did not, quite literally, walk off. Asterisk. You move again. A quiet orbit around the courtyard. The cat, having completed its study, decides your ankles require supervision. You oblige by existing. A camel near the trough dreams with its mouth, lips flubbing a noise like someone blowing across a bottle. You assign it the pillow with stitched waves, harbor nap, and the innkeeper pretends to write your name in the ledger, as if you've just been promoted to assistant night listener, first of your line. It's the kind of promotion that comes with absolutely no responsibilities, and all the satisfaction. Asterisk. Before you leave the stables, the innkeeper taps your shoulder and points up at the gate tower. We light a lantern there when a caravan is due, they explain. It's a detail that feels right small. Beacons answering each other across the dark, a quiet network of reassurance. Historians still wonder whether fees here were standard or flexible, whether a traveler paid coin, cloth, or simply a blessing funded by a local endowment. Tonight, it seems, the price of admission is gentleness. Asterisk. You pause to listen, not to the thought of tomorrow's road, but to the present inventory of tiny sounds. Leather creak, straw whisper, weightless moth wings, scaffolding a lamped flame. Distant footfalls on the wall, walk steady, unhurried. Your own breathing finds that pace, like a camel loping evenly along flat ground, one sure step after another. The courtyard doesn't ask you to be brave, or efficient, or historically accurate. It asks you to be here boringly and beautifully, while the camels file their sleepy sonatas, and the pillows keep score with roses, pomegranates, and clouds. Asterisk, somewhere near the gate. That first innkeeper laugh returns, almost silent, like a smile you hear. They angle the lamp away so you can see the stars better. Even all these centuries later, you recognize Orion, shouldering his belt across the sky. A little tilted, as if he too is leaning on a column tonight. You decide, privately, to rate the stars on a pillow of your own. Stitching the night's best note a camel's mid-hum, hiccup along, one corner, so you can find it again. Before the first bird decides to audition for dawn, the courtyard is already awake in that hushed, industrious way that doesn't need to raise its voice. You pass the stacked pillows, pomegranates, clouds, daisies as if they're sleepy judges, off-duty, and drift toward the small kitchen nook where a pan-bellied kettle waits like a moon, captured in copper. The innkeeper drops 3 cardamom pods into your palm and tells you to crush them gently with the back of a spoon. You do, and the green shells part with a soft snap, little perfumed seeds exhaling a scent that is equal parts citrus and comfort. A thumb-length curl of cinnamon follows, 2 strips of dried orange peel, and a neat triangle of black tea that looks like the corner of a night folded up and saved. Asterisk, the brazier cooperates with a tidy glow, the kind of heat that feels polite. You listen as the kettle climbs through its stages first, the tiny fish eyes, those pinhead bubbles sliding up the sides, then the soft murmur, the real kettle sigh you're meant to catch. In some tea traditions, people name these moments, a vocabulary for water that you didn't know you needed. It's a quirky signpost, but in a place where words and weather travel together, it makes sense that timing a departure could be measured in breaths and bubbles. You lift the lid when the sound is perfect, not a boil, just a hummed consent. The steam laps your face like a cat deciding you belong. Asterisk, out beyond the arch, the sky trends from ink to indigo. Up on the wall walk, a guard leans on his spear, which tonight is mostly a device for keeping his hand occupied. You carry 2 small cups up to him, leaving little steaming tails in the cold. He touches the rim of his cup to yours in a soft clink, then points across the vaulted blackness at a steady star just off the handle of the Big Dipper. Polaris is your fixed neighbor in this part of the world, the quiet pin you can hang a direction on. Traders everywhere learn it early, the body's way of saying north without a map. Below it, the Dipper itself is tipped as if pouring calm into the desert. Asterisk, you unroll a scrap of waxed cloth on the parapet, a simple star chart the innkeeper keeps for guests who aim higher than their feet. It's not precious, just ink dots and thin strokes. Orion's bright belt in a neat row, the Pleiades clustered like spilled salt, Cassiopeia leaning back into her chair. If you line the drawing with the sky, you can feel the clockwork turn in your bones. It isn't perfect navigation, not out here where ridges and riverbeds are your real lines, but it's a promise that the world keeps its appointments. A widely known truth rides in that cup. Caravans leave long before sunrise to use the cool hours, then rest at midday when the sun has opinions, and under these stars. The departure time reads itself on the face of the sky as surely as on any watch. Asterisk, back in the courtyard, the kettle has performed its duty with the punctuality of a well-run dynasty. You pour a ribbon of amber into a waiting basin and top it with water so it cools to kindness. A pair of traders materialize near the gate wedge, 2 silhouettes in wool and sleep. Their conversation is more embroidery than argument, short stitches, long silences. their trading room in the column. One wants to tuck in near the front to make a later split for a side route. The other, with 2 crates of dates and a deliberate camel, prefers the back where dust has already made its plans. The soft bargain begins. Morning prices are the friendliest. Words cost less before the sun taxes them. Your face attempts to look like someone who understands negotiating, which it accomplishes by becoming a patient pillow with eyebrows. Asterisk. The innkeeper slides across another cup. You time the road with many things, they say, tilting their chin at the simmering kettle. Stars tell you where. Water tells you when. It's a smaller truth that most caravans live by. The kettle sighs your cue to set ropes and straps, while the last set of night watchmen trade places with the cook and the gate porter. Some travelers even listen for the camel bell's small bronze throats that chime in a useful key, a lesser-known detail the innkeeper shares. Matter of fact, some bells are chosen not just for sound, but for tone people believe discourages bad luck, as if steady music can keep anxiety from hitching a ride. Asterisk. You take the star chart back to the kitchen bench and flip it over. Someone has drawn the path of last season's successfully boring journey. Little dots marking hospitable wells. A note in quick strokes where the road narrows. Another where the wind habitually pipes like a patient flute. You trace the line with a cardamom-scented finger and think about how many maps like this are never drawn, just carried in memory and traded with a nod. There are scholarly instruments out there, astrolabes polished to a polish worthy of a poem. But most departures begin with simple alignments, a north star, a kettle, and the sound a camel makes when it wants to rise. Asterisk. The courtyard stirs to a second breath. A handler clucks at a lump of fur with knees, which stretches into a Bactrian camel, in the same way a rug sometimes becomes a room by lying in it correctly. 2 boys carry feed in shallow baskets and pour it into wooden troughs with the seriousness of bakers measuring flour. You catch the faint metallic temps of the water at the basin, well drawn, mineral, and clean. Above, the eastern sky loosens a shade, and Orion leans toward the horizon like someone reluctantly leaving a good conversation. You hear a murmured prayer from the central platform, the dawn call wrapping itself around the stone and returning gentler. Caravans often pivot on that moment. A blessing, a last swallow of tea, and a new line of footprints. Asterisk. You pocket the starcloth. Not to hoard it. No one here would let you keep their weather, but to learn its grammar a little longer. The guard accepts the last of the tea and folds his arms, breathing steam and satisfaction. He tells you with a straight face that the best way to know if dawn is near is to ask a cat. They never lie to stars. He's joking, obviously, but you glance down anyway and find the courtyards. Research cat already positioned by the gate like a stamp waiting for an envelope. Your second small laugh of the morning happens before your first chore, which has to be some kind of record. Asterisk. To women in layered robes pass you with packs of herbs. They're quiet, sure of their steps, one of them humming a tune you don't know but instantly believe. Spices really do travel this road. Cumin, coriander, pepper, star, aniseed. Even when the loads are wool or paper, the air smells a little like a pantry with wanderlust. A widely accepted fact, what we call the Silk Road, carried more than silk. It carried necessities and novelties both, and sometimes it carried you, only not at the speed your modern shoes expect. Historians still wonder about the exact choreography of these mornings, whether most caravans standardized their departures by the same watch and prayer across regions, or whether each inn and each season braided its own rhythm from the options of moonset starlight and the day's first blue. Asterisk. You refill the kettle for the handlers who prefer their tea shire, a thin kiss of tannin instead of a full embrace. As you pour, you notice the nearest camel watching you with that unreadable long-lashed calm. It blinks as if it understands water temperatures and is prepared to file a report. You give it a look that says you respect its feedback. It snorts and fogs the air, which you accept as a 3-star review, promising pacing. Adequate steam, would sip again. Asterisk down by the saddles. The leather waits in a neat geometry. Your hands carry the day forward, warm from the cups, scented with cardamom, ready to work. The gate has not opened yet, and it doesn't hurry. The sky takes its time crossing from ink to cloth, then to pale silk you could almost touch. Somewhere a kettle sighs again, a second clock agreeing with the first. You fold the star cloth and slip it beside the pillows so the embroidered daisies can keep an eye on the constellations. The courtyard counts under its breath. 1 camel, 2, 3, a dozen, not to be rushed by anyone's anxious watch. You feel it too, the way everything aligns without shouting hot water. Cool air, a star that doesn't wander, and the calm mathematics of early bargains sealed with steam. A soft-throated bell hums once from the far stall, and that's your cue to trade warm cups for warm brush. The innkeeper hands you a stiff bristled broom, no bigger than a handspan, and points at a Bactrian who looks like a dignitary wearing a shag rug. The camel lifts its head, as if granting you an audience, lower lip relaxed, eyes half closed. You introduce yourself in the universal language of gentle circles. Dust rises in polite sighs, and the brush gathers a cloud of winter undercoat fine as fog. You can feel the difference. Guard hairs, like straw on top, downy comfort beneath. It's oddly satisfying, like erasing a chalkboard with the exact right eraser. Asterisk the fur catches moonlight's last scraps. You peel away a soft tuft, and the innkeeper nods toward a sack by the post. Save the best, they say. Baby coat? It's a small, practical footnote to commerce here. People do collect the fine spring shedding to spin into yarn and cloth, not the headline trade, but real enough that a good grooming becomes part of the textile story. You add the tuft to the bag with unjust pride, which the camel acknowledges by blinking twice, the official stamp of camel approval. Widely accepted fact, Bactrian camels, with their 2 humps and serious faces, carried the Silk Road on their back strong, cold-hardy, and sure-footed across stony flats and frozen passes where wheels sulk. They are the original all-terrain vehicles, only with better eyelashes. Asterisk you angle around to the saddle, which lives in the calm valley between humps like a boat in a protected cove. The frame is wooden, wrapped in layers of felt, the whole thing cinched by wide girths that spread pressure like a good handshake. You slip your fingers under the padding, searching for that one stowaway burr that ruins everyone's day. Nothing. You smooth the felt and tie a lump of fleece at the front where the wood could rub, a quieter truth of travel. More journeys are saved by patience and padding than by any heroics. The innkeeper murmurs, check the chest strap, and you find the broad band that keeps forward sliding loads. Honest. The leather is supple with tallow and dust, and you adjust the knot so it lies as flat as possible. Asterisk, the handler arrives with the nose cord, a plaited rope that clips to a small ring in the camel's soft septum. The rope is there for whispers, not yanks. Big animals should be led by ideas, not volume. You test the line, lift it, let it settle. The camel flicks an ear and chooses not to comment. You make a mental note that your own nose would like to be left out of such arrangements, but you admire the practicality movements, big conversations. Historians still wonder if the reliance on nose cords varied by region more than we think. Whether some valleys favored halters while others trusted the nose ring as a more precise signal. Tonight, the lesson is gentleness either way. Asterisk on a hook by the stall. The bright note catches your eye. A short string of glass charms. A handful of cobalt circles with paler dots nested inside, like small worlds trailed by even smaller moons. The handler loops them onto the headstall, so they dangle beside the cheek. They're the color of deep wells in twilight, what many call evil eye beads, meant to return a hard stare to its sender with a shrug. Elsewhere, they might be bone or shell, sometimes turquoise or lapis. Here, they're glass, and they glow faintly as the morning takes its first sip of light. You wonder whether the charms keep the camel calm or the handler calm. The innkeeper, catching your look, says, "It pleases the people, and a pleased person leads better." That may be the entire science. Lesser known angle. Some travelers prefer a tiny mirror charm instead, believing a flash of sky on metal is best at confusing jealousy. You consider adding a mirror to your own forehead, just in case compliments get rowdy. Asterisk, you move along the flank, brushing dust from the girth line and feeling for heat. A good pack animal tells you the truth with temperature before words fail. The camel sighs, a long bottle note, rising and falling, as if it's practicing the scale of unbothered. You answer by tightening the forward cinch half a hand's width, then loosening it, a whisper. Perfect is usually found between two small adjustments, and you are now a connoisseur of the whisper. Asterisk, two wicker panniers, wait, like well-behaved suitcases. One holds blue glass beads, stringed in a coil for the market-tround oval, and little eyes that peer from the palm. The other is heavier, a quiet cube of paper packages, sealed with a smudge of wax, and the innkeeper's stamp. You heave the panniers up with a two-person lift, learner's side for you, grizzled grace for the handler. They settle against the saddle's wings, and you hear the soft exhale of straps, deciding what they believe about gravity today. A small bag of stones sits ready to play referee. You add 2 to the lighter side until everything reads level. Caravan mathematics. First balance, then tie again, then pretend you didn't double-check everything twice. Asterisk down the line. A younger camel yawns in slow motion, revealing a mouth that appears to be remodeling itself. You look away politely, and it closes with the dignified calm of a librarian finishing a sneeze. You offer a nose scratch at the safe angle, and the camel leans into your knuckles with more trust than you deserve. Don't let them step on your foot, the handler advises, not unkindly. They weigh as much as a small argument. You widen your stance and adopt the international posture of, "I am prepared," which looks a lot like someone thinking about sandwiches. Asterisk, A. Bead string slips free and drapes onto your wrist. Up close, the glass shows tiny bubbles, evidence of breath captured in sand's second life. The cobalt is deliciously deep, the color that glassmakers coax by adding metal salts and patience. You loop the strand back onto the headstall, where it swings and knocks softly, a secret handshake with the bell's lower note. Historians still wonder if these beads along the route were mostly made in a few famous furnaces and then imitated everywhere, or if countless small kilns each had their own recipe, their own shade of almost night. The beads don't answer. They're busy being sky you can tie. Asterisk, you step back as the handler checks your work. He approves the padding with a grunt that is praise here, then tests the knot at the breast strap. Fingers as quick and practical as birds. He taps the pannier corners, listens to the thunk, and says, hums, good. You decide that is your favorite mechanical assessment. Another camel in the next stall wears tassels dyed madder red. They swing like slow comets whenever it flicks a fly away. The motion isn't only decorative. Movement startles insects and keeps them guessing. 1,000 small inventions like that travel as steadily as spices. Asterisk. The innkeeper brings a small pot of ash-gray powder and dusts a little onto the felt pads where sweat will gather. Clay and chalk, they explain, keeps the damp from sitting. A nifty footnote that feels like a grandmother's wisdom wearing work boots. You picture all the hands that refine that trick across centuries, one sore-backed animal at a time. The courtyard begins its final prelude. Clinks, murmurs, leathers, soft sentence. You slide a hand down the leg, against cool, steady, good to go, and feel the faint thud of a heart that has carried more stories than you will ever write down. Asterisk, you try on the handler's cadence, giving a tiny lift on the nose cord as you step off, and the camel follows like a patient cloud. It's almost insulting how easy it is once you've done the quiet work. Two traders watch and nod, their earlier bargain resolved. Dates in the rear, beads up front, both of them happier for reasons that are more about personality than logistics. You can relate. The research cat conducts an inspection of your boots, then grants you passage to the lane with a tail flick that translates to competent enough. Asterisk by the gate. The blue beads wink once, as the first strong light reaches the courtyard. A wind slides over the wall and smooths the dust, the way a hand smooths a crumpled page. You trace the hump's silhouette with your eyes, and think about why two hills make more sense than one in this landscape. Warmth, trapped. Weight distributed. Shelter, built in. You've met the saddle in its proper home. You've packed the day into mirroring baskets. You've tied a small blue sky to a calm face. If travel has a ritual, it is this: a conversation between gear and breath, between a rope that asks and a stride that answers. Asterisk the bell hums again, and everything briefly becomes a band, beads chiming a bit of treble, leather buckles ticking time, hooves soft on straw. You'll pulse somewhere between. You look up at the falling sky, the last of Orion stepping down, and smile at the thought that you are, among other things, now licensed to rate snores and align panniers. A good morning certificate. The camel approves with a judicious chew, and you could swear it nods at the bead, as if even an animal understands that sometimes, to keep moving, you carry a tiny, portable ocean. You step from the pale morning into the storerooms, cool hush, the air changing from sand-scented to dust motes hang like patient planets in a beam of light that slips past the door. Against one wall, steelyards rest like sleeping birds' long arms, with hooks and sliding weights, while on the central table sits a family of nested weights. Bronze cups, inside cups, a quiet puzzle that smells faintly of metal and clove. The door thuds shut behind you with the finality of a period, and the research cat slinks in at ankle level to audit your methods. It approves by occupying the patch of sun you are considering for your elbows. Asterisk. The innkeeper lifts one steelyard and lays it in your hands. It's simpler than it looks. A beam with a fulcrum notch, a hook for the goods, and a pear-shaped counterweight that slides along etched marks until gravity tells the truth. You hang a bag of apricot paste from the hook and watch the arm tilt. Your fingers travel, the numbers scratched along the beam, soft with use. The counterweight creeps like a thoughtful beetle down to balance, and there it is. Weight negotiated without argument. Widely accepted fact. This kind of steelyard has worked for traders from Rome to China. A universal lever that speaks the language of mass, wherever people have goods and gravity. Asterisk on the table. The nested weights wait with lid closed serenity. You lift the top cup, then another, until a whole stacking of measures sits like a parade, big to small, a graduated choir. Some cups are stamped with tidy marks, letters, numbers. A crescent that means the official in the market once blessed this set's honesty. The innkeeper tells you, almost as an aside, that traveling inspectors sometimes restamped weights at roadside fairs, a kind of pop-up quality control with more dust. Lesser known detail. A few weight sets hide tiny pellets of lead under wax, so an owner can fine-tune accuracy. If a cup has worn a whisper light, you imagine a late-night scene lamp knife, a breath held, and a merchant ending the evening smug about a gram. Asterisk, a tiny jar of saffron waits by the ledger, sealed with wax and optimism. You break the seal and the room sweetens to honey and hay with a metallic twang underneath, the smell of sunshine ironed flat and saved. Saffron is a handful of thread-thin stigmas, from crocus flowers 3 to a bloom. Each thread a red cyan. Yes, at this price, threads are counted. You tip a pinch into a porcelain dish, like you're pouring gold dust by the italic. The innkeeper nods toward a bowl of warm water. You drop 3 filaments and they drift, then breathe out a sunny bloom that doesn't explode, but real saffron reveals itself slowly. Pretenders like safflower copy the color without the fragrance, and turmeric turns everything honest and loud. You rub a single thread between moist fingers. It leaves a faint yellow and a smell that sits right at the back of your nose. Like a joke you're about to get. Asterisk, you weigh the jar on the smallest cup, balancing back and forth until the beam floats flat. The counterweight settles with a tiny, satisfied click. You think of each stigma plucked by someone's careful fingers at dawn, and you vow not to sneeze. The cat eyes the jar with forensic interest. You place the lid on firmly and slide it out of paw range, which in this room translates to nowhere, so you also put your hand on it and pretend this was always part of the procedure. Asterisk coins next. A soft clink as the innkeeper pours a palmful onto a folded cloth. Silver dirhams glint with neat script. A Sasanian drum shows a king's profile, wearing an architecture of a crown. A copper cash coin with a square hole peers up like it has questions. The table becomes a little bandstand. You tap 2 coins together. Silver rings with a bright, brief note. Base metal thuds like a shoe in sand. Traders cultivate a memory for these pitches, an ear that can tell plated from pure without. You weigh a few on the steelyards, baby. Kazan a balance with 2 pans and resist the cinematic urge to bite one, mostly because your dentist deserves better. Some coins wear tiny cuts, notches where a skeptical buyer once nicked to check for plating, or little banker's marks you can read like a gossip column of past deals. The innkeeper shrugs. Many hands, they say, many stories. Asterisk under your fingers. The cloth on the table makes a sound, a soft shiver, almost a whisper. You lift the edge. It's silk, a plain weave with a sheen like water under moonlight. You rub a corner between finger and thumb and hear the faintest crispness, the fabric's secret song. Some call that scroop, the quiet rustle silk makes because of how its fibers smooth and catch. You stroke the length, and it runs from your hand like a little stream. Widely accepted fact. Silk was once China's guarded secret, the worm, and the mulberry, and the alchemy between. People tell the tale that a princess smuggled silkworm eggs in her hairpins to Khotan, seeds of an industry tucked into an Uptoa legend, with roots tangled in both romance and plausible logistics. Historians still wonder how much of that story is a neat parable, and how much is an embroidered memory of genuine smuggling. Secrets travel, whether pinned or packed. Asterisk, you unroll another bolt. This one dyed a blue that your new bead friends would approve of. Indigo kisses your fingertips in the faintest way, a sign the vat was strong and the rinse thorough. The silk whispers louder when you flick it. Rain on a paper roof. You hold the cloth near the steelyard and let it breathe, watching the beam quiver as if the fabric's rustle has weight. It does, of course, only not measurably. The innkeeper laughs into their sleeve. You're making the scale nervous, they say. And the scale for once seems willing to admit the accusation. Asterisk, along the wall. Tall jars line up with quiet dignity. Cumin, coriander, cardamom, today's hero, and a crooked jar that simply says red. You lift the lid and meet powdered cochineal, maybe madder root, depending on whose handwriting that is. Dyes travel as faithfully as gossip, and both have to be tested. You wet a thread of silk and touch it to the edge of the powder, curiosity only. The color answers too quickly, a show of bloom that makes you put the lid back with gentle suspicion. Keep the recipes away from the cat, you murmur, and the cat pretends to read the labels. Asterisk back to the saffron jar. You count the sample threads you weighed earlier, lining them like tiny violin bows on the porcelain. 30, 60, 90. You feel vaguely like a dragon counting bristles on its hoard. You tuck the threads back and seal the wax with the back of your thumb. A smooth stamp you'd recognize later by your own whirl. You imagine a traveler in a week's time opening this, catching the same sun-hay smell, and feeling connected to your morning's carefulness. Out on the road, doses matter. A pinch for a pot, a few threads for dyeing a kerchief's border. Too much, and the rice becomes flamboyantly yellow, in a way that announces inexperience. Asterisk, you move through a gentle rhythm. Weigh the apricot paste packet. Test the clink of the new coin. Fold the silk. Breathe. The steelyard's sliding weight makes a tiny music of its own. A clink and sigh that becomes the storeroom's heartbeat. Weights differ across valleys, the innkeeper admits, leaning on the doorframe. Names match, measures don't always. The Mythco here, the Tola there. Historians still wonder how standardized these measures really were across the network, whether common sense and constant haggling smoothed the differences, or whether each border added just enough friction to keep every trader fluent in conversion and compromise. Asterisk. You find a small ledger tucked beneath the nested weights. Inside, tidy columns offer a portrait of politeness via arithmetic arrivals, fodder marks, coin counts, and the little notes that make a day human. Saffron, good. Silk sings. Dates, sticky, but cheerful. You add your own compact line about the morning's sample. Your handwriting trying very hard to look like it belongs in this century. The cat taps the pen with a paw and leaves a signature that looks suspiciously like approval. Asterisk. You lift the final bolt of silk and let it breathe across your forearms. It pools and whispers, a small private rainstorm. For a moment, you're aware of all the hands inside it: the worm, the reeler, the dyer, the weaver, the crosstown porter, and you feel a complicated gratitude. You set the cloth back, align the weights into their bronze nesting like a family reassembling, and hang the steelyard on its hook, where it becomes, again, a quiet bird. Asterisk. Outside, a bell hums you back toward the door, where light waits with the patience of sand. You slide the bolt and step out, holding the faint smell of saffron on your fingers and the faint sound of silk in your ears. The cat follows, carefully transporting the sunbeam. Behind you, the scales stop judging and return to breathing. Ahead, the courtyard brightens to a color about halfway between cardamom and coin, and your steps join the day's larger bounce one. More measure in a ledger that forgets nothing and forgives almost everything. You take the stairs tucked inside the gate tower, each step a shallow cup worn by 1,000 practical feet. Stone cools your palm as you trail it along the wall, saffron still faint on your fingers from the storeroom. The climb is slow by design. A watchman should arrive at the top with breath to spare, not panting like a bellows. The breeze slips down the stairwell like a friendly cat, and you follow it into open air. Up here, the courtyard becomes a neat little square of lantern light and layered whispers. Beyond, the desert opens like a book that prefers to be read with your eyes half closed. Asterisk. A spear leans against the parapet, a strip of frayed silk tied below the blade. It flutters with the breeze, just enough to tell the story of the wind without getting dramatic. The guard you met earlier accepts your arrival with a nod and slides over a small cushion that has seen heroic service. Chair of the sky, he calls it, and you sit, which proves him right. Your job is pleasantly simple. Listen, look, and refrain from falling off. You can do 2 out of 3 without thinking, and the third with the incentive of dignity. Asterisk. The wall stones radiate the last of the day's heat, like a sleeping dog, warm when you lean, warmer if you stay. You peer between merlins and catch the horizon exhaling daylight. The sky trades its indigo for ink, then switches back again at the edges. One by one, stars thread themselves into view, unhurried, as if practicing moderation. Orion shoulders up over the low dunes, his belt 3 tidy points you could balance a spoon on. You've met him already tonight, but up here he looks taller and somehow less concerned with heroics. The guard points with his chin. He arrives when good stories do, he says, and politely does not add, so you should start one. Asterisk. You answer with a small tale borrowed from the courtyard. The pillow, with stitched fish, that you awarded to the camel who hiccups. The guard laughs softly and taps the parapet twice, as if adding your story to the wall for safekeeping. Then he offers one of his own, the kind of small, useful myth a place invents for itself. Long ago, A watchman fell asleep and dreamed the gate would not close, and in the morning he found the hinge cracked. Ever since, they oil the hinges at dusk and again before dawn. Not because dreams predict metal fatigue, but because memory enjoys a good superstition to wear like a hat. It's a quirky detail that makes the gates smoother and the night calmer. You make a mental note to add dream maintenance to the ledger with a straight face. Asterisk, you practice looking, the particular kind that reaches past worry and lands on noticing. Far to the west, a lantern slides along a ridge, another caravanserai, signaling with a single eye. A second light returns the greeting from a lower pass. Those beacon exchanges, modest as they are part of a bigger truth, widely accepted fact. Caravanserais were fortified way stations with high walls, a single monumental gate, and watch posts expressly to protect travelers, animals, and goods, especially at night, when imaginations and opportunists wake together. The network worked because people kept it stitched: brick, water, fodder, watch. Asterisk, the guard produces a date and splits it with his thumbnail, the pit popping free with a sound like a tiny cork. He offers you half and flicks the pit into a little bowl by his feet, already home to a handful of apricot stones. Counting the hours, he says. You realize he moves one pit from bowl to bowl at intervals, his private clock that doesn't care if clouds hide the moon. He keeps time and fruit. You resolve to do at least one thing that charmingly practical every day. Asterisk, Orion sharpens as the night deepens. The guard points again, but this time not to the hero figure. He nods at the faint smear of the Pleiades, a thimbleful of icy salt balanced above Taurus. Calendar, he says. When that small cluster rides high after sunset, winter leans in. When they fade toward dawn, you have new grass somewhere. People read the sky for weather, the way you read a friend's face. Travelers learned which stars told direction, which told season, and which simply kept you company. You trace Orion's belt to his bright foot, serious. Practicing the old trick. Follow the line down to find the night's brightest. It feels like cheating, which you approve of when the exam is the size of a hemisphere. Asterisk, the lamplight by your elbow burns from a saucer of oil, a cotton wick laid like a lazy river. Every 2 stories. Your job is to pinch the char with a wetted thumb and forefinger, and trim it with a shell edge so the flame stays modest. The guard shows you how to lower the wick to a whisper, for the change of the watch. Then breathe it back, a tiny sunrise of your own. A lesser-known, perfectly sensible detail. Watchmen often kept a little heap of sand nearby to snuff. A flame quickly, without smoke, and to steady a lamp base in the breeze. You level the saucer into its sandy nest, and feel the lamp's gratitude in the way. The flame stops wobbling. Asterisk, you walk the short length of the tower, and find a chipped brick the size of your hand, its corner missing like a bite. When you touch it, your fingertip finds a shallow dent, someone's thumbprint, pressed into wet clay centuries ago, the way a person steadies a thing without thinking. Next to it, a tiny paw print crosses the course of bricks. A quick step from a curious dog or goat or cat, if history loves foreshadowing. You imagine the builder blotting the print, then shrugging and letting it stay. You wonder whether they believed the mark would last as long as stars, or disappear by the next rain. You wonder if the thumb belonged to someone with a favorite story, if they looked up at this same Orion and felt the same pleasant obligation to stay awake. A good wall keeps company across time. Asterisk, the guard tells you a more practical chronicle. The last dust storm came from the southeast, announced by a taste of tin and a thin line of sand lifting off the horizon like a silk scarf. They closed the gate early and tied the door with 3 ropes, the top one for pride. The courtyard slept while the wind explained itself to every surface. He smiles at his own memory of sweeping for 2 days and says, "The desert returns its mail." Historians still wonder if the lampandrum signals between caravanserais formed anything like a standardized code across regions. or if each post improvised nightly with common sense and neighborly guesswork. Up here, you suspect both could be true, depending on how patient the wind felt. Asterisk, a second watchman climbs up with a clay flask of cool water and a joke old enough to have gray hair. He calls the spear the long pointer, as in, nothing worries when the long pointer points at nothing. You take a sip, feel the minerals settle into your bones, and hand the flask back. Your contribution to defense remains primarily atmospheric, but your listening is elite. The men slide into an old story about a caravan that returned a year late because it could not stop finding friends. Every city fed them. Every garden needed watering advice. Every child wanted to learn to balance a ceramic bowl on a head. The slowest success, the guard says approvingly. You note this down in your private handbook under metrics. Asterisk below, the courtyard surrenders to its hush. Even the research cat has chosen a predictable spot atop the gate beam, head tucked, tail draped like a polite signature. You and the guards alternate, leaning and listening, eyes moving in a practiced figure eight. Ridge, pass, well, horizon, repeat. The frayed silk on the spear shivers and stills. The lamp burns the size of your smallest fingernail, and Orion tilts west a fraction, as if deciding which pillow to steal. At your elbow, the little bowl of pits tells you an hour has passed. You move one, as instructed, and press a thumb into the sand beside the lamp, leaving your own small proof of being here. Asterisk out beyond the wall, a faint bell answers a bell you almost don't hear. Two lights blink in slow agreement, then black drapes again. The breeze tastes like stone and dry time. You stack another story on the parapet with the others. A childhood memory of making a wind vane from a spoon and a stubborn straw, and how you learned that the world's invisible hands were always touching your cheeks if you paused long enough to notice. The guard puts your tail into his pocket with a nod. Up here, conversation is a ledger that balances itself. Asterisk, you settle a little deeper into the cushion that dared call itself a chair. The wall breathes. The lamp sips. The spear's ribbon writes wind in a quiet cursive. Stars keep their ancient appointments, including the ones you haven't learned yet, but intend to. You consider the thumbprint again, and in your mind, you add a single stitch of blue across its edge. Like the bead you tied to the camel sky carried forward by hand. The gate below doesn't move, which is exactly what you want it to do. You stay, which is exactly what your heart wanted you to do. And when Orion steps one patient pace west, you imagine he approves. The gate sighs open on its hinges with the confidence of something, oiled twice a day and blessed by a very reputable superstition. You and the handler step into the gray-blue that passes for morning before sunlight decides to commit. A small braid of bells along the lead camel's breastband answers the world in an even tone. A little pulse you could walk to without thinking. Behind you, the research cat keeps its appointment on the beam, yawns once with theatrical restraint, and files your departure under acceptable. Asterisk, the innkeeper walks with you as far as the first bend, carrying a small framed drum wrapped in cloth, as if delivering bread. Borrow, they say, pressing it into your hands. For talking on the road. The drum is a doralite, shallow, rim warm from 100 palms its skin, tuned just high enough to carry, just low enough to stay friendly. You slip it under the cloth and try a gentle tap with the pad of your ring finger. The sound comes back like a polite knock on a door you already meant to open. Asterisk, the road is more suggestion than decree. Two parallel lines of habit braided with footprints, hooves, and the occasional disagreement resolved by a rock. Date palms wake along the margins, their crowns arching into green fans. Trunks scrolled with old leaf bases like stacked bracelets. A coarse mat of fallen fronds softens your footfalls in places, and the air picks up a faint caramel note from yesterday's crushed dates, baking themselves into the dust. You pass a young grove where the fronds are bound upward in tidy bundles to keep them from bruising. A boy on a ladder made of lashed palm ribs carries a small cloth bag of pollen. He will hand-pollinate the female trees from the male flowers, an old, steady practice wherever dates grow abundantly. Widely accepted fact. Dates are a cultivated partnership, and in many oases, growers climb and dust the flowers themselves to guarantee a harvest. From the shade, a grandmother supervises with the kind of eyes that make ladders behave. Asterisk up ahead. A scout from a sister caravan appears, leading a donkey with a roll of felt balanced, like a cheerful cylinder cake. He flashes a quick hand sign, 2 fingers held up, then a slow windmilling of the wrist. The handler at your side mirrors the gesture, and calls back a soundless answer with his free palm-flat hand. Then a short sweep left. You read the conversation the way you'd read a breeze in curtains. 2 slow bends in the road, and a stretch of soft sand better taken in a long arc. You're learning the alphabet of hands. Palm low and pressing down means slow and quiet. Hand raised, fist closed, means bunched together. Fingers splayed, then tapped 2 lips, means water ahead, walk, but don't run your hopes. You add your contribution, a confident nod that says you are deeply fluent in gesture, which is generously accepted. The doira finds its role when the breeze turns tricksy, and the bells aren't enough to carry through the little scrubs. 2 gentle taps, spaced like measured footsteps, let the line know to keep the same pace. After a pause, 3 quicker pats, say bunch close, a narrow bit coming. A long, stroking roll under the cloth means stand, then wait, as the lead checks something. You keep the volume under a cushion, both literally and socially. Lesser-known detail, shared by the innkeeper before you left. Some caravans muffle their frame drums inside, a sack to keep the sound close enough to communicate. Not so much as to stir other people's animals or send skittish birds flipping like thrown scarves. Asterisk, the grove thickens, and with it, a polite chorus of irrigation water slipping through a shallow channel. The miniature voice of a qanat surfacing for air. The shade tastes green. Your breath learns it. The camels blink longer, the way you blink in a quiet library when everything is a little too peaceful to trust. A pair of black and white hoopoes inspect the ground at a stately pace, unfurling their head fans like well-placed compliments. You try the drum's 2-step tap again and watch the signal ripple back along the line, everyone adjusting without words. You will never be sick of that little miracle. Agreement that doesn't need explaining. Merchant riding near you points to a cluster of date spikes, silo in red, and offers the trivia that a haul of dates once paid for an entire set of copper pots that nobody needed until they did. Practicalities, like camels, have a way of looking inevitable in retrospect. He also shares a travel bread trick, dampen, a strip of cloth and tie it under the front bell to calm a clang into a murmur for long night stretches. You picture the bell with a muffler and approve as if you invented the idea. Asterisk dust lifts underfoot in a soft breath. Your ankles acquire bracelets made of earth, and you feel extravagantly The caravan stretches and bunches in an unhurried accordion, responding to the lead handler's hand signs. He glances back and gives you the sign for eyes up, 2 fingers from his eyes to the horizon, and you scan automatically. There, a low bump of stone stacked deliberately, a marker cairn laid by someone who also cared to make the road understandable. Next to it, a palm trunk leans at a precise angle, the shadow at this hour, marking an old measurement only the locals can really read. Historians still wonder whether the spacing of caravan along certain routes was standardized by edict, a planned day's journey of so many months, whether the pattern emerged more organically from where water could be guaranteed and where patrons felt generous enough to fund a wall and a well. The truth probably braided itself from both, a ruler's line, a land's logic, and a community's promise. Asterisk, at the second bend, a small drum voice answers yours from ahead, a soft double tap, like a heartbeat. You answer with the same, and a moment later, A hand goes up from behind a dune, then a head. Then the rest of a boy about the size of a rolled rug, who's been sent as a one-person welcome committee from the Sisterin. He trots beside you for a few steps, points at the soft patch you've already accounted for, and then holds up a leather skin with a sip of cool water. You drink and pass it to the next handler like a blessing. He tells you the inn's bread is good today, in the way bread sometimes is because someone's mood leaned into the flour. You promise to report on that with scientific rigor. Beyond the palms. A low band of tamarisk and poplar marks the edge of the next compound. You catch the first hint of smoke, a filament of blue, lifting from a chimney that probably contains a very happy oven. A handful of goats move like unhurried punctuation marks. Somewhere nearby, someone thumps a rhythm on a larger drum, the daytime voice of the gate, not a far-carrying warning. Just a little hello, telling the yard to prepare to receive guests at a pace that won't ruin anyone's digestion. Widely accepted fact, many caravanserais, especially in the Islamic world, served a social and logistical network as much as a military one, offering food, fodder, and shelter with just enough ceremony to keep order. Arrivals are events, but drowsy ones if the staff have any say. You pause at a small well cap where a rope goes down into darkness, and a wooden bucket comes up with the weight of respect. A handler dips his finger, tastes, nods, and writes Water's opinion onto his face, which you translate as honestly decent. Salt varies, iron varies, and every well has a personality. You learn the way you learn. Neighbors' preferred greetings, a quirky habit you pick up immediately before drawing. The inn's attendant flicks the rope to knock dust from the bucket's lip so that it skims clean, an elegant little move that saves you grittiness later and looks like magician's work. The doyer rests against your hip, warm and agreeable, while the lead handler gives a last series of hand signs to tuck the line back into good manners. Animals in shade, people to the bench, goods to the inventory table. You catch the eye of a woman at the gate, who answers your wave with a quick circle of the hand. Come, come, in the dialect of wrists. Two tidy pillows peek from a shelf just inside, stitched with new suzani vines waiting their turn in the snore registry. You try not to look smug about your previous evening's promotions in the Department of Acoustic Zoning. A final soft tap on the drum says, stop, which is a generous word here. Everything glides down to stillness, as if it had always meant to. The camels fold their legs with the practiced grace of a collapsing table. The bells do a last swish. Dust considers its life choices and settles on your boots. The palms lift and lower their fronds in a breeze that's learned its manners from curtains. You feel the shade gather itself around you and think, with unambitious contentment, of bread, melon, and whatever the oven gods have on offer. The road releases its hold without grudge. The next gate, very similar to the last, and still somehow new, opens to receive your footsteps, like a sentence that knows exactly where to place its commas. Shade happens so convincingly under the trellises that you feel your shoulders drop an inch. Grape leaves plate the sunlight into green coins, and the air cools the way water does when it forgets to be in a hurry. A row of melons rests in wicker cradles like polite planets, their netted rinds pale golden green, exhaling a sweetness that feels like the desert, remembering rain. The woman who waved you in sets a shallow basin on a bench and taps the rim twice, the universal signal for wash, then knead, which your hands have been itching to do since the gate. The tander sits squat and dignified in a low alcove, a clay mouth ringed with soot like a pot that took up philosophy. A small fire of apricot wood has already burned down 2 coals, heat riding the inner walls in a shimmer. Widely accepted fact, across Central and South Asia, deep clay ovens of this family tender, tonir have cooked flatbreads for centuries. The dough slapped the hot walls, baking in minutes, then plucked free with the bravado of someone who trusts both their timing and their fingertips. You can feel the warmth on your shins, a steady exhale, like an enormous clay cat purring into the room. Asterisk flour lives in a low-lipped bowl, the size of a small moon. You sink your hands in and part a soft dune to make a well. Add water, with a pinch of salt, and stir with your fingers until the mixture finds a voice. The dough pulls together shyly, a little clingy, as if it has abandonment issues. You need push, fold, quarter-turn breath, sinking to the sequence, and the gluten does its elastic miracle. Your technique evolves into something between a firm handshake and a shoulder rub for flour. A young boy spins a Jackie Chan iron bread stamp between his fingers like a coin. "Make it listen," he says, dead serious, which you interpret as work the dough until it agrees with you. You do, and it does. Asterisk on a low table nearby, bowls wait with small helpers, a paste of onion seed and sesame, a shallow dish of briny glaze that will shine the crust. In a pinch bowl holding something that looks like starlight tit, might be tiny midnight commas that make bread sentences read better. Lesser known detail. In this region, bakers press checkage patterns into the center of round loaves, not only to decorate them, but to keep the middle from ballooning. Some stamps carry a family motif or guild mark, and a few are given as wedding gifts. A promise that someone will always come home to an oven. Asterisk the melon advocate reappears with a knife that has seen 1,000 breakfasts and wedges an oblong turfan beauty with the confidence of an expert. The slice she hands you is cool from the shade, crisp, and so sweet your cheeks attempt to smile without permission. The famous melons of the Turpan Basin. Melons and their cousins earn their reputation the honest way. Hot days, cold nights, clever irrigation, and patient gardeners. You taste sugar and sun braided together, and somewhere a bee files a report. She shows you a trick you were not prepared to love. A pinch of crushed grape leaf on the melon's edge. A green whisper that makes the sweetness more itself. You mentally promote this oasis to your personal pantheon of culinary diplomacy. Asterisk. You shape a disc of dough in your palms and lay it on a round padded cloth, a soft-lipped cushion used to transfer bread to the hot wall without sacrificing thumbprints. The baker nods approval, palms the checkage, and stamps the center with a quick twirl, a ring of stars inside a ring of dots. You brush the rim with the brine so it bakes to a glossy, practical dignity, sprinkle a confetti of sesame, and pass the round to the baker, who leans in and smacks it inside the tender with a satisfying thwop. Bread transforms in front of your eyes, bubbles appearing like thoughts, edges tanning, scent turning the air into soup you want to live in. Asterisk, while the first loaves rise into themselves. You lean on the cool bench and watch the trellis perform shade like a rehearsed play. Clusters of grapes hang just shy of ripe, and you notice a small tower with lattice walls at the edge of the courtyard, or drying house where grapes will fine-tune themselves into raisins by the patience of warm wind. Another small miracle of the Turpan region, lattice work that lets air move while keeping sun polite. The woman mentions that sometimes they string melon slices too, for a week of gentle drying into leathery sweets. She shrugs as if to say, the desert is a kitchen with many slow settings. Asterisk the baker tugs bread from the clay with a pair of hooked irons and lays the discs on a wooden rack. The crust sings quiet, tinkling cracks that you can only hear if you lean in close, which you do because your priorities are straight. He slides you the first, still too hot to be sensible, and you tear a corner, blow like someone pretending patience, and burn your tongue a little anyway, which is an acceptable tax. The interior is tender, the rim chewy, seeds toasty. Your second bite contains the exact amount of pride you were aiming for. Asterisk, while you need the next round. The inn's elder explains the night practice. After bread is done and coals swept to the side, the tender is coaxed to an emberish hum. A low bench dragged near the masonry becomes the warmest seat in the county. On winter nights, travelers tuck quilts across their laps and do the ancient sport of talking while not moving. clay keeps the heat like a good memory. Sometimes, a clay brazier mangled pears with a short-legged table and a thick cloth draped over the edges. A home cousin of the Persian corsi. Feet slide in, hands cradle cups, and the night becomes an argument against haste. You picture the courtyard glowing very slightly while everyone pretends not to nap. It's less central heating and more a community thermostat you can sit beside. Asterisk, you try the checkage next. Stamp poised and press with determination. Your pattern skews into enthusiastic geometry, but it's honest work. The baker turns your bread so the heat kisses the shy spots, and asks whether you want onion seed or nigella in the middle. You choose both because you are living dangerously in the safest possible way. Historians still wonder if the symbols stamped into bread in different towns were read primarily as baker's marks, protective motifs, or simply pretty traditions that migrated with hands. The truth is likely all of them, depending on the day and the dough. Asterisk, a pair of travelers drift in from the shade and trade raisins for slices of fresh bread. A barter everyone approves. One of them shares a quiet fact you tuck into your pocket. Sometimes, bakers stir a spoon of yogurt water into the dough to tenderize and add a whisper of temps, especially when the flour is stubborn. You vow to try this at home, assuming you can convince a modern oven to identify as a clay cylinder for an hour. The baker also flicks a drizzle of salty water onto the tander's floor. A burst of steam licks the walls, and the next batch blisters even lovelier. Bread knowledge moves at the speed of neighbors. Asterisk, you carry a loaf to the trellis and sit where the grape leaves tremble in the breeze. The melon wedge on your plate perfumes the air like it moonlights as a candle. Someone passes a shallow dish of ground cumin and salt mixed with toasted sesame. You dab a bite of bread in it, and the day decides to be kind. A hoopoe lands near your sandal, inspects a crumb, and bows before moving on, as if you passed an exam. Asterisk, the elder taps the tander's clay flank with the back of his knuckles. Listening. Still warm by midnight, he says. Better than a blanket that walks off. You glance toward the sleeping platforms stacked along the courtyard wall, and imagine quilts pulled up. Feet toasting near the oven's shoulder. Stories braided to snores. It makes sense in a way your bones understand. A practical design that feeds you twice, once with bread, and again with warmth. Asterisk, you line shaped rounds on the cloth, brush on brine, stamp a constellation of dots, and pass them to the baker with the solemnity of a person who now has opinions about hydration and gluten. A widely accepted fact follows the steam. Caravanserais often provided bread and basic fare alongside shelter and water, supported by wukfe endowments or local patrons. Hospitality was infrastructure with recipes. And yet, as with many such networks, historians still wonder how standardized those bread rations were, whether a traveler could expect a similar loaf at each inn, or whether every gate offered its own version of contentment, textured by soil, water, and the baker's mood. Asterisk, when the last batch emerges. You stack loaves in a shallow wicker tray, each round a warm punctuation mark. The trellis gives a last flicker of leaf light. The tander breathes a satisfied sigh, and somewhere a melon decides to perfume the room a little more. You wipe flour from your palms onto your trousers, in the time-honored way of people who have done something correctly and would like their clothes to know. Then you carry the bread to the long table where tea waits, and where a small blue bead on your camel's headstall winks through the doorway as if to say it approves of your career change. You leave a sugar comet of melon on your sleeve and follow the call of paper and ink to a low table set near the shade. The surface is burnished smooth by years of elbows and decisions. A pen case lies open like a tidy nest. Reed pens with nibs cut at angles, a tiny knife, a pumice chip for smoothing, and a pebble burnisher that gleams like a tamed raindrop. The inkwell smells of lamp black, mixed with gum and a hint of clove, the kind of perfume that tells flies to mind their own business and ink to behave. The scribe taps a cushion, and you fold yourself down. The way a camel folds its legs, one part choreography, one part faith. Asterisk, he hands you a reed, then steadies your wrist with 2 fingers. Light touch, Braveheart, he says. Which feels optimistic, given your handwriting has historically resembled a startled spider. You practice a line on scrapped thin, thick, thin while he grinds a pinch more soot into the ink with a glassy clink. A small gourd with tiny holes to pounce, Shakur sits nearby, filled with fine sand to hurry drying. It's a very sensible trick. Dust a line, wait a breath, and the words settle without smudging, like polite guests finding their chairs. Asterisk, the first task is humble and real, tallying fodder and bread for the string of camels dozing in the cool. The inn keeps a short receipt for each caravan. How much barley? How many loaves? A line for other kindnesses that often covers the mysterious category of unexpected melon. Widely accepted fact. Along the Silk Road, Sogdian merchants built a far-reaching network of trade colonies, and for centuries their language served as a practical lingua franca from Samarkand east to the Gansu corridor. Documents in that hand, some of them found near Dunhuang, prove how business and family news crossed deserts under steady pens. The scribe shows you a neat Sogdian heading he favors for routine notes, the letters like quick little hills and gullies. Your version looks like a camel tried cursive with a hoof, but the ink sits nicely, and you decide to grade on effort. Asterisk, he tilts the page, and you try a second line in Persian beneath the sub, then a short line in a Turkic tongue for a handler who prefers it. Greetings morph as people approach the table, a hand to heart with salam. A soft nod and a piece to your road in a different cadence. A bow shaved of ceremony for the man who just wants his numbers. A traveler from farther east sets down a small parcel and offers a crisp, courtly greeting in Chinese. You answer with your best respectful smile and write a compact note that lists the parcel's contents in Persian with a Sogdian garnish. Then add a borrowed character he sketches for you with patient pride. It lands like a neat stamp of courtesy between languages. The table becomes a little airport of phrases, and you taxi them in and out with the concentration of someone threading beads. Asterisk. You reach for the sand gourd and dust your clumsy Sogdian heading. The grains fall in a whisper and roll off the ink with an approving hiss. Good, the scribe says, then shows you how to burnish the edge of a page with the smooth pebble to make it more resistant to sparinga. Quiet ritual that polishes both paper and mood. He cuts your reed's nib again, a tiny surgery he performs by muscle memory. Slice, split, kiss the ink, test. The nib writes cleaner, and you feel like a violin just tuned. Asterisk, next comes the joy of pressing seals. A small tray holds neat lumps of damp clay under a damp cloth. The scribe rolls one into a pellet the size of a fat olive, pricks a hole through it with a quill, threads a cord, and ties it around the neck of a little parcel of spice. He slides the clay to the knot, flattens it, and nods at you. Your mark. The inn keeps a set of stamp seals donated by patrons, a prancing ibex, a running bird, a star in a circle, and travelers add their own rings to the parade. You choose the ibex because it looks like it knows things. Pressed into the clay, the ibex springs to life under your thumb, horn curling like a question mark, legs midlit. The imprint catches the light, and for a second you feel 10% more official than you have any right to. Asterisk seals do more than decorate. They tell the untampered truth. If the clay breaks, the cord story is interrupted. Across this network, stamp and ring seals make promises that hands can check. The scribe shares a practical, slightly charming trick. Wet your thumb with a whisper of sesame oil before pressing the seal, and the clay won't cling, leaving a crisp relief. Your ibex improves immediately, achieving a level of athleticism your handwriting may never reach. Asterisk people come and go. A wool trader with a clan tamga. He presses into the clay like a signature. A monk with a narrow roll of thin paper tied in blue, the seal pressed with a little rectangular chop. A local farmer who pays his fodder bill in coins and grapes and asks you to write his name slowly so he can learn it anew in letters. His grandfather didn't use. Historians still wonder if Caravanserai's commonly employed resident scribes, or simply relied on whichever literate travelers were around: merchants, monks, court messengers to write receipts and notes. Surviving documents rarely say, and the answer may be as varied as wells. Some inns had a regular hand, others borrowed, whoever's pen looked steady that week. Asterisk. The scribe opens a narrow drawer and reveals a scrap of something you'll appreciate later. A short, fading Sogdian note that starts with a blessing and ends with, "If you go, tell the apricots to hurry." It's both commerce and affection, which is how a lot of business actually gets done. He smooths it flat, and you notice the paper takes ink politely, without feathering. He grins at your interest. "Samarkand paper?" he says, pride disguised as shrug. "Lighter than leather, kinder than bark." He doesn't elaborate. "You'll see vats and mulberries soon enough." But for now, the page feels like a promise folded thin. Asterisk. You write another receipt, this one listing a pair of dyed wool bundles and 2 baskets of raisins, and you try the habit he teaches. A little flourish on the final letter, then a straight pen stroke beneath the last line. The stroke isn't just pretty, it keeps mischievous additions from sneaking in after you've turned your back. You've met bureaucracy's lullaby, lines, seals, strokes, all layered to cradle trust. You dust the ink, blow very softly. The paper smells faintly of starch and sun-end. Slide the page aside to dry. Asterisk. The research cat arrives to inspect quality control. It chooses the exact moment you set a new clay pellet on the cord to delicately place a paw on the edge of the table. One pad kisses clay. A paw print joins the ibex like an accomplice. You consider leaving it security by cat butt. Decide to roll the clay again while the scribe laughs, who are weakening quietly, into his sleeve. "We don't punish excellence," he says, and flicks the pounce shaker like a tiny tambourine to celebrate. Asterisk A. Man with wind-burned cheeks asks you to write a short note home for him. He dictates in a slow spill that starts with weather and ends with a tender insult only a brother would recognize. You shape his words carefully. Then he presses his ring into the clay seal with awkward dignity. He asks you to add one more line, the exact phrase his mother loves. You don't know the tune, but you know the chorus people are always smuggling love in with the lists. You tuck the sealed note into a pocket of the ledger for the next messenger heading east. The scribe adds a tiny mark to a column to say, "Letter collected." The book's way of learning to keep secrets gently. Asterisk. By the time your third receipt is drying, you can hear singing from the far side of the courtyard, a low ribbon of melody carried on steam in afternoon light. Someone has started a kettle. Someone else has started a prayer. Your reed pen rests in the notch of the pen case, ink quiet, clay seals lined like calm buttons along a twine. The table smells like lamp black and cumin, old stories and new math. You tuck one more blue bead into your pocket, even though it doesn't belong here. It feels like carrying a piece of sky for the road, the way a good word carries a whole language for a single favor. Asterisk. You rise, legs unfolding to match your pen's neat lines, and hand the scribe your last, best attempt. He raises an eyebrow, which counts as lavish praise in this office, then stamps the corner with the inn's house, Sela, small gate, and a star. You write with a soft foot, he says. You take it as the compliment it clearly wishes to be. On your way to the singing, you catch the sound of the pounce gourd again, the tiny hush of sand blessing letters into certainty, and you imagine a path of words following you out into the courtyard, greetings, rising and falling from tongue to tongue, a conversation long enough to cross a continent without ever needing to shout. The singing threads through the courtyard like steam rising from a kettle, warm, soft, and sure of its destination. You follow it to a narrow lane where poplars lean in like gentle chaperones. Over your head, a string of prayer flags runs from beam to beam, blue, white, red, green, yellow, frayed at the edges so the wind can read the words quicker. You pause to let the colors flit past your eyelashes. Sky, cloud, fire, water, earth, and the breeze obliges by turning the line into a library. You tuck the blue bead deeper in your pocket because suddenly it feels like good manners to match the sky with your inventory. Asterisk, a small shrine keeps its voice low under an eave of sun-faded tiles. The door wears fingerprints at the exact height where visitors need reassurance. You step inside and your sandals try to shush the floor. Commendable effort. Poor results. The air smells faintly of juniper smoke and melted fat lamps trimmed to the size of thumbprints. Someone has swept the stone so clean you can hear your own carefulness. The caretaker nods, you toward a wall that holds its breath even better than you do. Asterisk, the mural is the patient work of many hands. A sky the color of lapis ground and stretched thin. Robes in mineral greens and ochres. Halos measured by a steady compass. Scenes stacked like shelves, musicians playing lutes and flutes. A caravan trotting across a painted horizon. Donors kneeling in clothing that looks local and distant at once. A small inscription curls along a border. Part prayer, part receipt for a promise kept. Widely accepted fact. Along this road, from the caves near Dunhuang to the painted grottos around Turpan, patrons commissioned walls full of Buddhas, bodhisattvas, saints, and stories. The paintings often record their donors, officials, families, sometimes with notes in Chinese Codanese, or later Uyghur scripts. Proof that art and community shared a ledger. Asterisk, light moves slowly across the pigments, showing off, then reconsidering. You lean in and find a tiny world. A painted musician's sleeve, shaded by cross-hatching so fine, it feels whispered. A sandal strap that someone corrected with a careful second line. A donkey whose ears seem half a heartbeat from pricking. You spot little incised guide marks under the paint. Faint grids scratched into the plaster. Evidence that the composition was squared and transferred before the brush did its best thinking. Lesser known detail, and it makes you smile. To copy figures from a master drawing. Some painters pricked outlines with tiny holes, pressed the sheet to the wall, and pounced charcoal dust through. Yes, pounced. The same word as your ink drying, sand leaving dotted lines to follow, like starlight. Your brain makes an unhelpful leap from pouncing to the research cat, and you picture whiskers patting at a charcoal bag. You swallow a laugh that would echo. Asterisk. The caretaker lowers a lamp to show you a patch where cobalt kisses the plaster of blue so deep you could fall in. He says, more to the wall than to you, that this particular hue might be azurite from nearer hills, while the richest ultramarines traveled as ground lapis from far-off mountains to the west. A small fortune in powdered sky. You imagine the pigment bowls, malachite green like riverbeds, red earth all cinnamon and iron, chalk white, like the sound of a quiet day. He points out a place where a gilded halo once sat. The gold leaf has mostly gone invisible except for a ghost line, the way a ring leaves a polite circle on a finger. The wall is honest about time. You find that reassuring. Asterisk, from the corner, the singing returns, now close enough to count the breaths between phrases. A monk sits cross-legged by a pillar, his voice moving in a low ribbon that doesn't hurry. Beside him, two traders add a harmony that knows exactly 3 notes, all of them friendly. A child leans on their mother's shoulder, humming, a cradle tune you nearly recognize, although it keeps slipping into another song, and then back again, like a road choosing between paths. The caretaker smiles without showing teeth. Borrowed lullabies, he says. They travel well. You sit on the cool floor. Your back against a pillar that has learned patience, and let the rhythms do their work the way syllables from different languages solve a shared math. Count, rest, repeat, sleep. Asterisk, you try humming along. which your voice accepts with the confidence of a camel strolling downhill. It's not pretty, but it's steady. A traveler with wind-tanned cheeks introduces a line of a lullaby from farther west. Soft vowels easing over the consonants like water over stones. Another offers a tiny children's rhyme from farther east, brisk and sweet. Words arranged like stacked boxes. Someone raps a single refrain in Turkic, a phrase that translates you're told. Later to moon, do not trip over the roof, which is both a charming warning and decent advice for first-time stargazer. You notice the songs agree on the important parts. Hush, I'm here, and you don't have to count anything for a while. You add exactly 6 notes, then retire gracefully from leadership. Asterisk, your eyes roam back to the mural, while your ears do their resting. A donor's robe shows a pattern of pomegranates linked by vines that, if you're honest, looks suspiciously like the embroidery on last night's snore-ranking pillows. Continuity is a design choice across centuries. A musician's instrument, round-bodied with a long neck, holds a likeness to the lutes you imagined in the courtyard. Someone painted the strings with a single, confident stroke, a straight line trained to behave. Near the edge, you spot a small fingerprint pressed into plaster near a robe hem, a whoops immortalized. To its right, the faintest paw mark, too. The builder's cat gets everywhere, apparently, or else the universe is adding you a wink. Asterisk. The caretaker explains how the wall's skin was made. A first rough layer of plaster, then a finer one, painted while still damp, so pigment and surface married properly, in some places, where time worked less like a gentleman. You can see the seam's day's work boundaries called giornate, an Italian word you don't say aloud, because you're trying to be a polite guest. Here, they have their own old terms. He shows you the hair-thin edge, where one day's blue meets the next day's. A stitch that only surfaces when light sidesteps just right. You file the technique alongside bread stamps and pounce bags, under quiet genius. Asterisk, open questions drift like polite guests around the base of the lamp. Historians still wonder if the donors at some of these sites are portraits of real patrons, or idealized types generic devotion in a nice hat. Whether certain robe patterns signal specific merchant guilds, or just the painter's love of pomegranates. Whether the blue here is local azurite, practical, or imported lapis, decadent. A pigment choice sometimes decided by the success of last year's harvest as much as theology. They also wonder how often the songs you're hearing now crossed the threshold with the painters. Did artisans bring their own tunes, seeding melodies along with color, or do lullabies spring up independently wherever a knight and a child meet? Asterisk. The prayer flags outside crackle lightly at the window's edge. The caretaker shows you a small basket of cloth squares, blank and bright. He dips a bamboo stylus in thin ink and writes a short line on one, a blessing for a safe road. That reads as much like a wish as a plan. He invites you to add one. Your handwriting still resembles a spider mid-sneeze, but the act is what counts. You write a single word you mean. He ties your flag to the line with a knot as simple as a promise, a lesser-known practical detail. Sometimes charms are stitched with a thread of hair from a beloved animal for luck. Here a single camel wool strand finds the knot and sits like a secret. You feel more equipped than your boots do. Asterisk, a guide points to a painted halo and a small hole at its center, which seems like an odd choice until he shows you the compasson, all in a string used to score. Perfect circles around a tiny pivot point. He sets the tip into the hole, pulls the string taut, and traces an invisible orbit. You picture a painter, leaning close, steadying breath, making a universe hold still with a tool simpler than most spoons. You are impressed enough that your humble hum upgrades itself to an almost melodic line. Almost asterisk you. Step back when the singing folds into contented silence. The wall keeps its choir, your ears keep their echo, and the room asks nothing further of you. You make a careful bow that nearly involves a broom, correct the trajectory, and receive the caretaker's amusement as a small blessing. Outside, the prayer flags have learned a new suffix from your added square, and your blue bead knocks your thigh, a pocket-sized nod. The poplars tilt their leaves to show both sides at once, silver and green, as if applauding innovation in very slow motion. Asterisk, when you leave. The sun has adjusted to its late afternoon optimism. A hoopoe bounces along the path, inspecting ants who refuse to comment. You rub your fingers together, and they still carry a hint of saffron and lampblack. Bread and ink, pigments and prayer smokehan. Inventory of gentle occupations. The mural's blues follow you out the door, nestle behind your eyes, and quietly revise the sky to their favorite version of itself. The flags lift a little, release a whisper you can't quite translate, and you accept the message anyway. Walk soft, sing if you like, let color choose you, and trust that the wind has already memorized your best intentions.